Hey, welcome to Fans of the Forge. This is a special interview episode, and as you can see, we have Neilson here, Forge and Fire Judge and ABS Master Smith. Neilson, thank you for joining us.
Happy to do it. It's a lot of fun.
And by thank you for joining us, thank you for allowing us to come to your place and record in your apartment.
Hey, I'm not paying the rent here. We can do whatever we want.
We've been watching the show for a while now. We're big fans of yours. I actually recently started watching your DVDs and
cool.
getting into that as I build a forge in my own yard and get my own shop up and running. So it's a little surreal as we come down here knowing that we're going to meet Neilson, but I'm glad we could get it all together, and we have some questions for you.
Fire away.
All right. First off, it's kind of a wide-ranging question, but how did you first get involved in knife making?
It's the same old thing. People, I'm turning 50 this year, so most people are kids my age. We watched the Conan movies way too many times as kids. Sword and the Sorcerer, Animal King, or whatever the heck that was. All kinds of crazy sword swinging movies.
Right.
And I got interested in swords. Reading the Lord of the Rings books, all that kind of stuff. It gets kind of into your head, just like generation before was into Cowboys and Indians. Mm-hmm. And when I got older, started working on my own, I started collecting cheap swords. I did have a couple of nice historical pieces. One's coming up, you guys will see it on the show. But then that was no fun because I wanted to actually make something. And I figured nobody's carrying swords around, but people use knives every day. And I started out doing stock removal. I started out, grinding saw blades and files and whatnot. And it's very, very rough stuff. And, it was just a hobby, just something to do. Very therapeutic because I have very high blood pressure and kind of like a little high-strung sometimes. So I'd get home from work, I'd start working on knives, and it was a very therapeutic kind of thing, which a lot of people I hear that from on a regular basis nowadays. And it just progressed. I started grinding out blades. I put a knife kit together first. I bought a blade, bought some handle material, put it together. That was cool. Okay, that's done. Started a little stock removal. Okay, that's cool. What's next? And I got to the point where I actually went to a knife show. I didn't even know they had such a thing. And I was living in Pennsylvania. I went to a little show in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, called the Keystone Knife Show. And I had horrible stuff on my table. Like I said, it was all ground out of files and saw blades. I had deer skins on the table. It was sad. I still had a big, long ponytail going down the back of my neck. And I wanted to forge because Damascus was just becoming a new thing again. It was just becoming a resurgence. And I wanted to get into that because I loved the look of it and I loved the creativity of it. And I just didn't know how to do it because there was nobody around me. And there was no big internet thing back there. There was no instructional DVDs or anything. I think we were still popping VHS tapes back then. Oh, sure. Matter of fact, I know I was because I had a Jim Hirashula DVD. I don't know how he did that stuff. It was a horrible method. But anyway, didn't work for me. But there was a gentleman at the same show named Keith Bagley. He lived down in Maryland. And he was a farrier by trade, but he was a knife maker. Stuff on his table looked great. And he came over to my table and basically he took pity on me and invited me down to his shop for a weekend. And he taught me the basics of forging, forge welding. I did that, tried not to beat his anvil up too much, and came home and dropped a block of steel into a bucket of sand and a little hand-cranked charcoal forge, claw hammer, and went to town. And that's how I started out. Oh, wow. And it just progressed from there.
That's awesome. That's really cool.
How long were you bladesmithing before becoming a master smith?
I got my Master Smith in 2008, a journeyman smith 2 years before that, and I started making knives. Well, let's see. I'm not good at math. That's why I make knives for a living. So I've been doing it for about 25 years.
Okay. Wow.
So I started forging in about 2000. That's when I started forging seriously.
Okay. That's cool.
So yeah, it's been a while.
Was there any particular blade from the Master Smith requirements that you found particularly difficult?
The dagger. Everybody does. when you're forced to make something in particular. I mean, you could put your own twist to it, your own flair to it. Yeah, the only thing that helped me is I like making daggers. It kind of goes back to all that sword stuff from when I was younger. I don't really know too many other people that enjoy making daggers. Usually it's a punishment on the show. When yeah, when Will unveils a dagger blade, everybody's like, oh God, no. But I enjoy it. So I did have a little bit of advantage there. It was fun for me. And the big thing was that twisted wire inlay handle, because everybody either does black wood or ivory, black and white, and I do not like doing the same thing everybody else does. So I did desert ironwood burl, which was I probably should have put a nail gun on my head, because it's a hard wood to work, but it came out beautifully. It was actually on the show when we did the Quillian dagger episode. That was actually my Master Smith dagger that was on the show, because I know I'm friends with the person who purchased it. So, but they make you wait outside a long time when they do the judging, even if there's only 2 or 3 of you, just to build the stress level up. And when they came out, they asked me, how many of the sandals did you make before you got it right? And I said, I'm not telling you until you tell me whether I passed or not. And they said, no, really? I said, no, really, I'm not telling you until you tell me whether I passed. They said, yo, you passed. Yeah. I said, that was the first one. Wow. And I just, for some reason, I usually get lucky. The first time I try something, most times I actually get it. And then the next 2 or 3 go right to hell. And then I got to kind of like rebuild the skill or something like that. But yeah, that was a tough one.
Can you give us a rough estimate of how many knives you've made in your life?
God, no. Can I count the arm hairs I have left? No, I remember talking to a pair of brothers. I did a little bit of heat treating work for them, because there was they were used to using stainless steels. They had an order for some high carbon blades, and they weren't sure how to do it. And we were friends. I said, just send me. I'll take care of them for you. And they were boasting and bragging. There's 2 of them working in the shop, and they had a cousin helping them. And they sent their stuff out to get heat treated. And they were, we had 160 knives this year. I didn't say anything. And he was like, that's good, isn't it? I said, dude, I did almost 300 this year by myself, and I do all my own heat treating. What the hell are you bragging about? So, I mean, it varies a lot. Sure. I mean, it's actually, I worked my tail off. I would make pretty much anything anybody asked for, and there's some god-awful stuff out there with my name on it. And I have on occasion gone to small knife shows and found pieces and recovered them. I bought them back, and they're at the bottom of the Susquehanna River now, right by my house. I don't want anybody ever see that stuff. But yeah, I made a lot of stuff. And some of it was small, quick neck knives, some taking scrap Damascus cutoffs and making little neckers and stuff. But yeah, I was averaging, an easy 200 knives a year.
Wow.
But it's gone down as my quality's gotten better, my journeyman, Master Smith. The whole goal was to make less knives and make more money.
Sure.
Right.
And it's gotten to the point where even a simple knife, like I show you the one I'm carrying on this season right now, it's just a very simple knife, but it's just very clean. Everything's tight. Nobody can find the flaws in it except me, which is the key to being a Master Smith. Ed Caffrey told me that. Because we don't make perfect knives. We just make knives and nobody knows where the flaws are but us, and nobody else can find them. But yeah, I've made a lot. I have no clue. That's like when somebody asks me how long it takes to make a knife. I can't answer that question. So if that's one of the ones on the list, just skip it.
No, we know not to ask
that.
Because
it always varies.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite blade style to make?
It's funny you say that, because I swore when I first started forging blades, I was not going to make a ton of Bowies. Because everybody makes Bowie knives. Dude, I don't want to do the same thing everybody else does. I always want to try to do a little bit different, set myself apart. But it's just too good a canvas to work. Yeah, it really is. I mean, I've said it on the show too. I mean, just a slight alteration of the choil and a clip, and you've got something totally different. You put a notch on it and sweep the clip, you got a Spanish Bowie. You put a bar in the back, you got a Musso. I mean, vest buoys that gamblers used to carry and stick people between the ribs with. Big pig stickers, 16-inch pig sticker buoys. I mean, there's so many variations you could do. Then you had the Damascus concept, either laminate, mosaic, powdered steels, meteorite. I mean, there's just so many different things you can do. So yeah, I hate to say it, but I love doing
Yeah.
Bowie knives.
What's the largest blade that you've made?
Well, not counting swords.
Right.
Okay.
including
Oh, I
swords?
don't make. I've only made a few, and the biggest one of those I made was like 33 inches, I think.
Okay.
But I didn't enjoy it as much as making knives. It was a request, so I'd made a few of them, just like folders. I haven't messed with those in like 20 years almost. But the largest recent fixed blade knife that I've made is 23 inches.
Okay.
So
Good size.
Yeah.
that was good size. Yeah, I didn't post it too long ago. It had a big feather carving on the sheath and that pine cone composite handle. Yeah, and then he flaked on me. It's all right, I sold it quick. But yeah, that was a monster. I had to put it at an angle to get it into my heat treating forge for tempering. So,
Oh, wow.
but yeah, it was a beast. I got pictures of my son holding it somewhere.
So, I mentioned that I've been watching your instructional DVDs.
Okay, I got a question for you.
Yes.
Do they help?
I have learned a lot of good techniques that I had not seen before. And we've done some work with some local smiths. We've done stuff with Peter Burt. And who else did we work with? I'm blanking now. Matt Berry,
Okay.
Ryan Brewer. Dave. Well, we didn't work with Dave Parthmore, but we've worked with those guys a little bit here and there. Oh yeah, we started with Theo Naz.
Oh, I missed Theo. Yeah, Theo was on the show.
So we've gotten experience from a few different guys and actually getting in there and working with tools. And immediately when I saw your DVDs, like, you approach things a lot differently. Like, for example, the anvil smash way of straightening the blade, which, it was funny that I happened to watch that DVD a couple days ago, and then, or maybe it was last week, and then the episode of Forge and Fire that aired showed Gene Hodges using that method at his home forge, and I was like, I just saw that Jay Neilson did that.
A lot of it's stuff I picked up over the years from other smiths. A lot of it's stuff that I just figured, dude, this makes sense. Let's just try this. It's funny. Almost every episode we shoot, I talk about somebody doing something, and this is the way I do it. And I look at the camera and go, and you can find this out on J. Neilson type DVDs, mountainhollow.net. And my executive producer just laughs every time I do it. And he goes, eventually you're going to do it enough times, I'm going to add it. I said, well, now you curse. Now I'm going to do it every episode. No, it's good. I just try to make everything like straightforward and as simple as possible. I like simple. I don't like complicating things. It's not rocket science. I'm not trying to make myself look smarter than I am. It's just knife making.
Yep.
Just make it easy.
Right. So what I noticed, at least from those DVDs, is that you perform edge quenches, at least on the blades that you showed there, rather than doing a full immersion in the quench oil. And is that your preferred method for heat treating all of your knives, or is it just vary with the style of knife that you're making?
For most knives, probably 90% of them, I prefer to do an edge quench. Unless a style requires a hard spine, like Scandi Bushcraft, because a lot of people use that for scraping or fire starting or something like that. I actually like doing daggers where you get the edges really thin, so the edges heat up first and get hotter, and the core stays cooler. So even when you quench the whole blade, it's really just the edge, and you get when you etch it, you get a nice flame pattern looking like.
Oh, cool.
But yeah, unless it requires it, like doing a bore knife. A lot of times the guys want the whole blade hard because they're not worried about chopping. They're just stabbing with this thing. They're just putting into a pig.
Right.
So they don't want the whole thing hard. So, for most knives, I'd rather have a little bit of flexibility in the spine. I'm in Pennsylvania. We had a lot of hunters. So if they're digging into a joint or something like that, give a little bit of shock resistance, a little bit of flex to it, as opposed to a fully hardened blade. So yeah, I do prefer that. And again, I could show you on the one I'm carrying too, because that's an Edge Quench W1 blade.
All right, cool.
What's your favorite style of Damascus to make?
Raindrop.
Okay.
I love. Well, it's the first easy answer you guys got, isn't it?
Yeah, there you go.
I like a ton of different styles. The mosaics with the jelly rolls are fun, but they're a nightmare to do. I'm still improving my feather pattern. I mean, I've got it down, but I think I can do better on it. And again, that's a pain in the butt pattern. but just something that's nice and simple and random. And I don't like using those set pattern dies. I like using them a little more random, so it's not exactly the same. As long as you're not pinching on the same side and making a weak spot in the blade, it just mixes up nicely. Another nice one is doing a wave, splitting the two, having rain on top, rain and waves on the bottom. I've got a couple of those on the website too. It's good rain and waves pattern.
That's cool.
So mixing them up a little bit is fun too. But yeah, I like raindrop. It just looks cool to me.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to someone first learning to be a bladesmith?
I get this one all the time. Aside from buy my DVDs. No, I'm just saying. I'm just kidding. No, honestly, go to as many knife makers, blacksmith shops that you possibly can. I've seen way too many guys starting out, and girls, that just get into it, get the fever, get the bugs, start buying tools, and getting this. And then when they actually start doing work, realize they don't need half of the stuff they bought. So if you can find knife makers that are making stuff you like, go see them if you can possibly do it. Go see as many as you can if you possibly can. And just see what they're doing, see what they're using, and flat out ask them, which tools do you use more than the others? Which ones do you prefer and why? And just get that information before you go start spending hard-earned money.
That makes sense. And, I'm hopefully not the guy that got the bug and went and started buying a bunch of tools. I bought a couple things. I have an anvil, I have a little forge, and I bought some hammers and things. But
I tell you the truth, one thing I've noticed with a lot of guys and girls, buy tons of hammers and tons of tongs. I've got one hammer that I use for 95% of what I do. It's a 1,000-pound Swiss pattern. I've got one heavier, and the only reason I have that one is because of a guy who bought too many tools and then ended up selling them all. But I really only use maybe 3 or 4 different hammers and maybe 9, 10 different pairs of tongs. So you don't need tons of stuff.
right.
And a good way to practice smithing, make your own tongs. Make some of your own tooling. That's good practice for learning how to manipulate steel. How to hit it, how to use the horn of the anvil, which is the most underrated part of the anvil as far as I'm concerned for knife makers. I use the horn of the anvil in my shop all the time. And I jump out of my chair and cheer when I see somebody using a horn on the show. It's like, it's a giant metal rolling pin, use it. But yeah, you don't need tons of stuff, really. I started out with very little. I went to my first half dozen knife shows, and I was still using a 1x30 grinder from Harbor Freight.
Oh, wow.
So it's not so much of having great tools. I've still got cheap tools in my shop I use on a daily basis. I still got 2 Grizzly grinders I use every day, along with my KMGs. But it's getting used to the tools you have and making them work for you.
Right. So, how did you get involved with Forge and Fire?
I was actually in the middle of forging out some blades. Phone rang. There's a cell phone in my pocket. I answered it. This little voice says, "Oh, hi, this is so-and-so from the History Channel. We're planning on starting a knife forging competition TV show. We're wondering if you're interested." And I said, "Yeah, okay, who's this really?" Because in the community, we had heard off and on rumors about somebody starting a knife forging show, but nobody ever had any, like, "Oh, where'd you hear that from?" Nobody had any knowledge. So I thought it was one of my buddies' wives or girlfriends calling. They were playing a prank on me. It took her like good 5 minutes or so to convince me she was actually from the History Channel. And she said, well, would you be interested? I said, I don't know. I said, I don't know, reality TV and all that stuff, I'm not really sure. And she goes, well, we're looking for you to be one of the judges. I said, well, that sounds a lot more interesting. I said, really? And I did a Skype interview. And even though I was Master Smith, I was fairly one of the younger ones. And I had the 2 people that were interviewing me laughing within 10 minutes. I had them cracking up, just doing stupid comments and stuff. And I guess they figured, okay, he's got a stamp. We see on videos that he beats the hell out of his own knives, and he's got a sense of humor. We'll give him a shot. And they flew me out to Seattle. and we did the pilot there, and it was one of the most dangerous things I ever saw in my life. But everybody survived, just a little facial hair lost. And then it went from there. It just kind of took off. It took us like several months later, and they was like, okay, we're going to start shooting in New York. Pack your bags and jump on over.
Wow, that's an incredible story to kind of hear from your side of things.
It was a nightmare. Well, you got to figure, I walked into it. David Baker, great craftsman, wasn't a big forger. I mean, Dave did a lot of theater props and movie, TV props. Doug never made a knife in his life. He's designed tons of them. So I walked in there, and there's a whole studio crew, and nobody knew much of anything about knives. So we started brainstorming, challenges, tests. I remember one TV person, not anybody that was on the set, it was just from up on high back at that time, got a great idea. I tell everybody this story. Got a great idea. Going to give every contestant a toaster, and they can make a knife out of it. And I don't know if I'm allowed to curse on this.
Sure.
But I said, you're a fucking idiot.
Yeah.
I said, that's the stupidest idea. First of all, there's not enough hardenable metal in a toaster. And that was one of the biggest problems, is having people understand the difference between hardenable and non-hardenable steels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So a lot of ideas got thrown out there that were just not going to work. And then they came up with some certain tests that were just like, let's chop cinder blocks in half. Well, why don't we just stab the people with their knives while we're at it? I mean, come on, let's be serious here. I mean, we do some brutal testing, but it was just when we were first starting out. So it was a lot of education. And it's gotten to the point, we're on season 7 now, and we've still got a lot of the same crew from season 1 and 2 that we have now. And I'm pushing for a crew challenge.
Oh.
These,
really cool.
especially like our cameramen, our audio people, they are dying to drop the camera and start swinging a hammer.
Yeah.
They've learned so much through osmosis. Because I remember when we first started doing this, I'd be jumping up and pointing stuff out for the camera people to catch. He's about to
Right.
do something. And I was getting praised. I was like, well, how do you know they're going to do stuff right before? Because everybody thinks it's editing. I said, I know, because I did all the same stupid mistakes when I first started out, too. I know exactly what's going to go wrong, because I did it. And now, as things have progressed the last few seasons, I'll be looking over here, and one of the cameramen will be flagging me. Look what he's going to do. Look what he's going to do. These guys know now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, these guys want to jump down. So I'm trying to push for a crew episode, a crew challenge, because these guys want to prove that they've learned, as much as some of the guys that have come on the show.
They've certainly seen, at least the crews that go, when the Smiths go home and do their final weapons. So they're there 5 days with them, seeing the process start to finish too. So I'm sure that.
Well, think about it in the way that, we visited with a couple Smiths so far, right? The guys that are going to the home forges, like, I know that there's a couple guys that go all over the place, and just seeing all that different technique and different equipment and how it's being used, I'm sure, like, implants itself in your head there. And
Yeah, I haven't talked to a lot of the people that go out and about, because it's kind of a different crew.
Yeah.
But a couple of them have come back to work on set, and they got stories. Man, they got stories. You got to figure, if you willingly want to play with fire, explosive gases, high amounts of electricity, and sharp and pointy stuff on a daily basis, there's got to be a little bit something wrong with you. There's a little. We're a little bit different. And so, we're going to be a little entertaining. So that's probably why one of the reasons the show has gone so well, because people are like, I can't believe he's going to do that.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of times when I'm doing the strength testing, half the time I get people in the crew like, oh my God, give me a heart attack every time you start doing this. I'm like, oh, I'm stupid enough to do it. So.
Have you always tested blades so aggressively?
Not when actually, I didn't do so much when I was doing stock removal, because there wasn't as much stress on the steel and stuff like
Right.
that. But once I started forging, I didn't so much stress test my blades, but when I had ones that warped bad, or I had something with a crack in it, or something that was definitely not saleable, I would take those and beat the living hell out of them, because they were trash anyway. If it's got a flaw in it and I can get it to survive certain things, then at least I know certain aspects of the blade are still good.
Right.
And then from there I went to at least every 2 weeks taking one blade of different, whatever steels, because I was always big when people are starting out, pick 1 or 2 steels, simple ones like 1095, 5160. Perfect your heat treat on those. Once you know it's perfected, then move on to another steel. So when I got to that point, every couple of weeks, I would forge a blade out of a certain steel and beat it to destruction. And I did eventually get to the point of chopping cinder blocks and stuff like that, just totally abusive, destructive stuff. And I had a lot of flaws, and I worked with the heat treats, adjusted things, even adjusted the bevels and the grinds on the edge, and my edge geometry, and even to the point of like taking torches and softening tangs and shoulders and stuff like that, because I like doing a lot of hidden tang knives. And I'm a firm believer of beating the living hell out of your knives. And I would tell people that when I was doing the knife shows. And, you got to kind of get a little wishy-washy, and that's like, okay, well, they got this Facebook stuff now and stuff. I'm going to start proving that this stuff holds up. So I started doing little videos. And it's like, okay, now you can't deny it. Matter of fact, when we first started using the 52-100 ball bearings, which these videos are still on YouTube, I think it was season 2, maybe, I can't remember, but we had a lot of flaws on the show, a lot of cracked blades and stuff. And I mean, I'd been using 5200 for a while, and they were like, is this really good steel? Or are you just screwing with us? Because they know I like screwing with them.
Yeah.
And I was like, look, trust me. So I took a 1.5-inch ball bearing. I think it was 1.5 inches, might have been 2 inches, I don't remember. And I normally didn't shoot during the summer because that's when I had my kids. So I want to spend time with the kids. But I took one of the ball bearings from the show, and I stretched out a full tang knife with a 9-inch cutting edge. It was only 1/8 of an inch thick. And I did every test that we did on the show, from ropes to bamboo to coconuts. I took a square cat litter container, made my own ice block.
Yeah.
And the last thing I did was a coconut chop. And I didn't touch the edge on that knife at all, because you could see the slime on it before I started each new test. I'd clean it off. Yeah. And at the end, it was still slicing newspaper.
Wow.
Holy cow.
And I videoed all of it. I posted it all on YouTube, and I told the TV people, there.
Yeah.
Now you know it's good steel.
Right.
We just need to get people to work it right.
Yeah.
And one of the biggest things that screws people up is the TV lights.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Because everybody's so used to working in a dark forge.
Yeah.
So the bright lighting in the TV, and I always try to remind people, keep that in mind, use a magnet. But yeah, the TV lights are a bugger.
Of all the different types of things you bash for the strength test, is there any particular one that is the most destructive to the blades that you're testing?
Oof, that's a good one. Well, there was this one that we tested. I had just done a 16-inch 52-100 blade, and I saw this video. And we never used it on the show. My knives have done so much stuff that has never turned up on the show. It's ridiculous. I almost in tears one time. As I'm chopping away at chains, this board full of chains and cables and barbed wire, and I'm thinking, I hate you guys. You're not my friends.
Yeah.
You suck. You all suck. We did one. It was some kind of dog chew bone, and it snapped my blade right in half. Flew over my shoulder and all that. But the ones that we've had on the show, probably the most destructive is the antler chop. Because I've got one hanging on the ceiling of my shop right now, and it's still got chunks of metal from contestants' blades still stuck in it. Yeah, it was one of the few prizes of war I got. So I got a few of those hanging in the shop. But yeah, the antler chop really chews things up.
Yeah.
Probably the worst one is the ice block, which is fun.
Yeah.
I got one coming up. I can't wait.
Oh, nice.
So we saw recently that you made a new strength testing baton for the show. Do you make any of the example weapons besides that dagger? Was there anything else that you've made?
There's a couple things that are coming up as display pieces, but Dave takes care of all the finale stuff. I'm the round 1 and 2 guy, so I've made 5 so far pre-test knives, and it wasn't until I think season 5 that I broke that one that I just mentioned. And that's our director of photography's fault completely, because we were waiting to do that test, and he walked up to me, he goes, He goes, why is it we never break any of your blades? Sure enough, that's the time I broke one. I was like, you son of a... I still give him hell to this day. But no, yeah, I've made 5 pre-test knives of different sizes for different things. Like I did, like an 8-inch narrow blade with a forged-in thumb stop for stabbing like drum cans and stuff like that. Medium range one and a big giant slicer. I just reposted a video on that one. But yeah, I've made knives just to go through all this brutality. And the very first one I made, it was actually, I started it when we were doing the promo photos that they have floating around from season 1. Called it the Toxic Cheeto, because it was this horrible orange Kieranite that I let the crew pick the handle material, and they dubbed it the Toxic Cheeto. And we couldn't kill that thing. Matter of fact, I actually took it, and that's sitting in my shop right now. I'm not giving that one up. There's been a few others I made, like that one I did during the summer with the ball bearing, and a couple others that I've donated to charities and stuff like that. But there's still 3 on set right now that I made a few years ago, and the Toxic Cheeto's hiding in my cabinet in my shop. I was like, this first one I made it on set. I'm keeping the suckers mine.
That's cool. That's really cool. So let's see here. Do you ever wish you could do the ballistics dummy test rather than Doug on the show?
I do enough to them off camera. I mean, I'll walk on set and I'll just walk by and just watch the head go like that. No, they won't let me. They really won't let me do that. I've asked. They recently let me do some of those MMA dummies. Yeah. Yeah, I got to try to brutalize a couple of those on an upcoming episode. But no. Well, actually, I did gut stab a couple of them after Doug was done with them. There was a couple that we had that the contestants' blades really didn't do anything to them. Oh, okay. So I just walked by and went. Yeah. I didn't get fired still. Those things aren't cheap.
Oh yeah.
You ever want to mess with one of those pigs that's just hanging there?
God, no. Those things are disgusting. I remember one season they were bringing it when we were still shooting in Brooklyn. These things were coming in green. We're in the green room and we're like, oh God! And then you walk out and they're seriously. They actually had the makeup people trying to cover these pigs up with makeup. I was like, God, these are nasty. No, they weird. The eyelids are cut off them or stuff that's just nasty. I'm not messing with them.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember it wasn't too long ago, Doug, because Doug's always like checking out the cuts afterwards. Yeah. And he had cut one in half and he was down checking. They came up and I was like, oh, you just kissed that nasty pig. So now I try to stay away from them. But one of the things we do get grief about is wasting all that food, and all that stuff does go to a wolf rescue.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, it doesn't get wasted. And they prefer to do that because these wolves get released into the wild again, and they don't want to be feeding them kibble.
Right.
Yeah.
So they actually, the animals that we use on the show get tossed to these wolves. They still eat off of carcasses and stuff like that, just like they would in nature. That way when they get released, they got a better chance of hunting and foraging for themselves. Wow. So that's one thing a lot of people don't know.
Yeah. A couple years back, you had Doug and Will make their first knives in your shop. How were they as students?
Oh my God. This is the reason God made tequila. No, they were great. Doug was kind of hesitant at first. I gave him a little grief. I'm like, hit the damn steel. Yeah. Because he was but I understand, same way when I started out. You're trying to be careful, hit the steel calmly. So, Doug took a little more coaxing, a little more coaching. Will, I should have shot him with a tranquilizer. He was all over the shop, man. He's turning on machines. He didn't even know what they did yet. He's on the grinder. I'm like, Will, I'm running over across his shop. So I'm trying to take it. I had polar opposites in the shop that day. But it was a blast. We had a great time. And I'm showing them, and it's funny. Like I said, when we first started out, nobody knew anything. And I'm sitting at the table now during episodes, and Doug's over there talking about grain structure and edge geometry, and I'm just like, what the hell? Yeah. It's like, damn, I must be a pretty good teacher. I got all you guys figured this out. But yeah, Will went on making knives. He still does. We had a day off in Brooklyn. And they were able to use the forges every once in a while. So I was in there working. I think Dave was there too. I don't remember. But Will came in with his girlfriend, his wife now. And he looked at me. He goes, I'm going to make canister, because we'd seen so many people screw up canisters recently. He goes, I'm going to make canister. I'm going to be at that forge. Don't talk to me. I'm not going to ask you to help me. He goes, I've seen people screw it up so many times. I bet I can do it. And I'm just going to try and do it. And damn if some bitch didn't do it.
Wow.
He did. He made a canister first time, peeled the can off. I'm like, God damn, you did a good job. Then he made the mistake of folding it, and then he had seams and stuff. But he still made a really good knife, and he gave it to his son. And it was cool. He was very proud of that. And he still makes knives when he has time.
Yeah, I've seen him post some things. I know he made one recently. Someone else that was getting married, I think he gave it to him as a gift.
Yeah, and he's given ones to his sons and stuff like that too. Doug just posted his most recent knife. He made a karambit out of a banana.
Oh yes,
I've seen that.
He showed it to me. I'm like, you're just silly. Doug's like the most dangerous guy in the show, but he's also the biggest comedian on the show. He's always cracking jokes. I'm always like, oh my God. He's always got a wisecrack. So.
He's like the king of the dad jokes.
Oh
sure.
God, it's terrible. It's terrible. I remember when they did. We did the one episode with all like boat implements, like boat propellers and stuff, and they were making boating jokes and puns. And I found, I seriously, this wasn't staged. I actually got up and walked out the table during the show, and they aired it. I was like, son of a bitch, I didn't think I were going to do that. But I walked, I can't take it anymore. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fun. I thought, and every time we use ball bearings, like, oh, it's going to be a bad day. It's going to be a bad day. The worst one was the bolts and the nuts.
Oh yeah, we saw that one.
I don't know how Will got so-and-so. You need to get 6 licks on this nut. I was like, oh my God. It's like, well, I only thought we were going to last 3 seasons anyway. So.
All right, we're going to role play for a moment. Zombies have risen from the grave and the world has devolved into martial law for the survivors. You have only edged weapons available to you as your main method of defense.
You obviously don't remember I'm from Pennsylvania.
What would be your preferred style of bladed weapon to survive the zombie apocalypse?
Honestly, I'd probably go with the machete. They're easy to make. They're easy to sharpen. Thin edge, light. They're not going to weigh you down. Easy to swing. You can swing that all day.
Nice.
Not the prettiest thing in the world, but it's effective.
Zombies don't need the pretty knife.
Yeah. To be covered with gore anyway.
So you mentioned a little earlier on, and I actually have a whole question about it.
Uh-oh.
You used to have
Now I'm going to get fired from the show.
long flowing locks of hair.
Oh, God.
Why did you cut it?
Honestly, I get a lot of people, because it was in 2008 when I got my Master Smith, and I got a lot of crap from people about, oh, you cut your hair so you look more respectable. That wasn't the case. I was riding my son around on all fours playing, horse.
Oh, yeah.
And he would use my hair as reins and kept yanking it back and yanking it. I'm like, oh, God, this hair is just getting old, and he's hurting me. Hell with it. Just chop it off. And that was it, really. When he started yanking my hair like that, and I was getting to the point where this is getting to be too much to take care of.
Yeah.
So I was like, done, had it. It was funny, if you notice in season 1, I had longer hair than this. Mm-hmm. And this was an accident, because my wife cuts my hair, and she was cutting my hair one morning in the kitchen. I hear, oops. So, oops? What do you mean, oops? Your barber and your doctor are 2 people you don't want to hear oops from. So she went a little too far on the wrong setting. I was like, just finish it off. Mm-hmm. And I went back on set, and I'm legally not supposed to alter my appearance. And one person squawked, and the EP at that time was like, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's not that bad. Just leave it. And I just figured, hey, this is easy to take care of. They don't have to put a product in my hair or anything like that. So it's bad enough I got to wear makeup every day. I don't need to have my hair done, too.
We're traveling to Blade 2019 next week, and it's our first time attending. Have you been in the past, and if so, do you have any recommendations on how we should approach attending the show?
Have a few beers first.
Okay.
Everybody else is
I'll
going
do
to.
that.
Everybody else is going to. No, be careful of that, because I have seen people, they started serving alcohol a couple of years ago at the Blade show, and I saw a few people that were like, shouldn't have been around knives.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know if they still do that or not, but no, everybody has a good time. Yeah, I did the Blade show for several years. Excuse me. I remember I used to have my little bitty table all the way in the back in the ABS section, and a friend of mine, Ed Caffrey, been a Master Smith forever out of Montana, all the way in the front. And every year, that was like my source of information. I would go up there, grab Ed, drag him all the way back to my table, and just say, what do I need to work on? and he'd tell me flat out, be totally honest, not being a dick about it. Kind of like when somebody asks you to critique your work, you're going to be honest, not be a jerk. But look, if you want me to tell you it looks good, just say that. Otherwise, I'm going to tell you what you need to do.
Right.
And he would tell me, and I did the Blade show several years, and it was great. It's grown. I mean, it's huge. You can't see the show in a day. So plan on that. Plan on parsing it out. Go see this section, this section, this section. There's going to be a ton of Forge and Fire things down there. I mean, I think they have a couple booths down there by now.
Yep.
But the last time I went was a few years ago, before we started doing the big get-togethers. And I went down there, and I had a little Forge and Fire sign, and I had some autographed pictures and stuff like that. And I couldn't sell a knife to save my life, because nobody even saw the knives on the table. All people want to do is talk about the show, take a picture, and get an autograph.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this might sound like it being a dick, but I'm not going down there paying all that money and promoting the show unless the show's paying for it.
Right.
Because if I can't sell any knives, and I don't need that much of I'm a pretty secure guy. I don't need that. I can't even think of the word. I don't need that pat on the back.
Or the adoration.
Adoration. Yeah, I don't need that. I'm a very simple person. I mean, I don't even like forging shirts, Forge and Fire shirts. Nothing related to knives or forging I wear when I'm at home, because I'm not looking for attention, anything like that. I mean, if people recognize me, great. I'm happy to take a picture with them, sign something, chit chat with them for a while, but I don't look for it. So yeah, I'm not going to go to the Blade show this year.
Okay. Well, I guess that makes sense because they don't show you doing anything on the show except for judging.
Right.
So for that aspect, they just know you're a judge, even though
Yeah.
it says ABS Master Smith.
But honestly, there's tons of
They
people
don't-
that watch a show don't even
They don't know what that
is.
means.
Yeah.
They don't know what
Exactly.
the requirement. Like we know what the requirements are, and we're like, it's crazy. Like
Yeah, I think on the history website, I think they've got little blurbs about each judge and what we've done in a little video, I think.
yeah.
They did. I mean, I had little things about me going around touring the shop and explaining the tools and what. But yeah, there's a lot of people that just watch the show and don't know all the specifics about it.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to force it down their throats. So.
Right.
Yeah.
Have there been any weapons on the show that have inspired you at all, or things that you maybe hadn't seen before or known about?
I still want to make a Kapinga. It's hanging on the wall on the set right now. It's this like 3-bladed throwing
yes.
thing. It looks like so much fun to play with. And I keep thinking, I bet I could get that off the wall and nobody would notice for a couple episodes. But yeah, I still want to make one of those. There's been several Smiths that have inspired me. I mean, one of the things I love about this is I'm still learning. That's one of the reasons I stopped taking orders, because I eventually would take time just make stuff I want to make, because there's still tons of things that I want to try that I haven't had the chance to. So yeah, I want some free time eventually to play around. But yeah, there's definitely things I've seen. The first one, Kapinga, comes into my head. But yeah, there's several things that I've seen on the show. It's like, I want to go make one of those. That looks like a lot of fun to play with.
Yeah.
Hopefully I don't hurt myself, but I probably will.
Yeah.
I got something here. Okay. So this one is actually a question provided by our friend Ben Seacrest, who goes by Fiery Ice Forge on Instagram. We met him at Pigeon Forge, and we've been chatting with him ever since. He's also a beginning knife maker. And his question is, what is your current favorite grit progression on the belts to disc sander? Is it on the belts, then to the disc sander, or hand sanding grits for your blades?
I don't use a disc sander very often, but when I'm grinding blades, I start off with 36 grit,
Okay.
then I go to a 60, and then I heat treat. I keep the profile at 220. I always knock the profile down to 220, knock the corners off before I heat treat. Then after heat treat and tempering, I go back to a 60, clean everything up, and then I go 220, 400, 600, 800.
Okay. Cool.
And when I hand sand a blade, I will go back to 400 grit and then end at 800 grit.
Cool.
So one key thing about grinding, which is on the DVD, and I tell everybody this, you see it all the time on the show too. People start grinding, then they see a deep scratch that they didn't catch and have to go back a grit. Alternate your blade. Alternate the angle of your scratch pattern every grit. So go straight across with one grit. Next one, angle it up this way, so the scratch pattern's gone. So once all those upright scratches are gone, you know all that grit's gone. Next grit, do it again, switch it the other way. So that way, once all the last scratch pattern is gone, you know you don't have to go back, and it saves a lot of time and trouble.
Oh, interesting.
What's your favorite thing to make besides knives?
Steaks.
Good one.
Steaks. Yeah, me and my wife Becky live in a small town, northeastern Pennsylvania. We finally have a really good restaurant, but before Forged and Fire, me and her watched Chopped all the time, and the same people who made Chopped made Forged and Fire. It's the same premise, format. So that was one of the things they told me, that was based on the Chopped cooking show. I was like, oh, cool, you got me there, you got my interest. So yeah, we learned to do a lot of our own cooking. I was a single father for a long time, so I learned to cook for me and my kids. Becky was single; she cooked, single mom cooked, and we kind of collaborated. And half the time we go to restaurants and we'll order burgers just because we can cook all the fancy stuff that's on the menu already. So yeah, we like cooking.
Is there anything on the horizon that you think you might get into or want to get into, even relating to blades or even working in a different medium?
I want to try out doing some of the stainless steel sanmai. Ed Caffrey sent me his formula for it. It's tacked to the wall of my shop. It's been sitting on the wall collecting dust for like 2 years. I want to try some of that stuff. There's different patterns I want to play with. I got patterns in my head that I want to try out. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Kind of like the ball bearing Damascus, using the 1/4-inch ball bearings.
Mm-hmm.
I had been using large ball bearings for years for the steel, and I'd done canisters, like taking all the scraps over the years of Damascus cutoffs, clean them up, put them in a can, make a fossil Damascus. Yeah, I love doing that. I do that like once a year, save up all my stuff. But yeah, it's I just had the ideas like, well, I use ball bearings all the time. I make canisters. By the way, I don't sleep well at night, so there's a lot of stuff going on in my head. That's why I don't sleep well. What if I filled up a can with little ball bearings and forge welded that? And I tried it, and it worked great, and I tested it, again, beating the life out of it and doing different blade styles and edges and stuff like that. And then I took it to a show, several blades, and people were like, holy shit, that's so cool.
Yeah.
As in, you can tell it's forged. That's another trick, too, for people who don't make knives. You can tell if a Damascus knife is forged or just cut out. If the pattern gets longer and thinner towards the tip, you can tell it was forged out. But yeah, people thought that was cool as sliced bread, man. That was like the biggest pattern I made for like the next 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, it's still popular. So it's like I said, I get stuff banging around in my head that I just want to try patterns, some of the stainless sanmai, doing some more sanmais with, I've got some very rare wrought iron that I've acquired from Lake Michigan. I'd like to try doing some of that and maybe doing a Damascus core with a jelly roll pattern so it looks like it's rolling waves underneath
That's cool.
the wrought iron. Just like I said, there's tons of different stuff I want to try. But yeah, the stainless sanmai is definitely one I want to try because when I first started out, nobody would even think that would work. And now it works.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh, cool, let's try it. Let's give it a shot.
Awesome.
So there's an upcoming episode that's going to be airing, I think, next week where the Smiths have to use meteorite to make a blade. Have you ever made a blade out of a meteorite?
I got a whole section on my website. Matter of fact, that was my idea for the show.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
I was contacted by a meteorite collectors and sales people out in California. Like I said, they're on the website. I haven't made anything for them for a while just because I've been so busy. But they had people that were making knives out of meteorite shaving or slabs.
Yeah.
And I said, well, that's great. I hope they're letter openers. And she's like, why? I said, well, it's not going to hold an edge. I mean, it'll cut for a while, but it's not going to hold up. It's more of a display piece. And she said, well, what do you think will work? I said, well, I'll tell you what. You cut your own meteorite, right? Yep. What do you do with all the shavings? They're in a bucket. Okay. Tell you what. Send me some pieces of meteorite, small cut-off chunks that are scrap. Just basically send me your garbage. And let me see what I can do with them. And I started mixing different amounts of meteorite shavings from different meteorites and mixing it with 1095 powder. I prefer using the 1095 because of the higher carbon content, 0.95 carbon. Like any of the 10 series, the last two is the amount of carbon in the steel, because it's going to sit in the forge a lot longer, go through a lot more pressure. And again, started testing. And it almost like a Starry Night kind of look with the mix of just the shavings and the powder. And again, went through the same, beating the heck out of it, seeing what would hold up, see what mix actually worked the best. And then I started throwing bits and pieces of actual meteorite in and mixing it up. And then I'd start getting some of it towards the edge, which I didn't want. So I started sand mining it. So I would take the shavings, the powder, and the bits and pieces and make a block out of that, and then take that and sand mine it between like a 1095 core or something, which again, I get pictures on the website of different ones like that. And then the ones that we didn't do the mix would just be the powder and the shavings. Like I said, you get this weird kind of like Starry Night kind of look. It just doesn't look like normal steel. And that took off pretty well. That was pretty cool. And then I had people like buying it, had their own meteorites, and like, I got this for my collection. Can we chop it up and use it? Yeah, okay. It's your money. Whatever you want to do. Take a perfectly good meteorite and chop it up, make a knife. Sure, we could do that. But it's one of those things like the fossil Damascus. I'm hoping we do an episode of that because it's just one of those things. It's just unique. It's not like a ladder pattern or a twist pattern. It's never going to look the same. No two blades are ever going to look the same, no matter how hard you try, and that's what I like. Yeah, I like having just looks totally different. I mean, I take a blade out of the acid, it's like Christmas for me. It's like opening a present. It's like, what do we got here? Because you're never quite sure. Sometimes it's a pair of socks, sometimes it's a fire truck. You never know.
Do you guys have any other questions?
I do.
I'm sure I like the hesitation.
Well, no, it's not like that. I don't know if it's worth leaving in, but so I know. Well, I've heard that W steels are for the W stands for water, like for quenching.
I don't know if it stands for water. I've heard different stuff about that too. You can water quench them.
Okay.
Matter of fact, I just answered this question online for a guy a couple of days ago. You can water quench them. I don't.
All right.
Why? I mean, you work really hard on it. You want to take a chance of it cracking. And really, if you're going to use, don't use water. If you're going to do that, use brine.
Okay.
It's a little better for the blades. The water is a little more shocking. Brine works better. We've had contestants that have quenched swords in brine before. And, it's like about 50-50. Sometimes they crack, sometimes they don't. But, you can do it. I just don't.
Right.
I don't want to. I work too hard on this stuff. I don't want to take any
Right.
chances.
Yeah. So, I mean, the thought was if it's, but then again, it comes back to, is it meant to be quenched in water?
A lot of times, me and Dave have had this discussion before too. A lot of times when W steels are being quenched in water, they're for industrial purposes. They're things that are like 3/8 of an inch thick, like big cutter blades and stuff like that, which they're not going to fracture nearly as much as an 1/8 inch thick knife blade. So
Right.
I just don't see the point of doing it.
Makes sense.
When I started using W1, I made some big choppers and quenched them in water, and I was chopping 8x8 barn beams with no problem. So I was like, okay, that works. I'm not gonna fuck with it.
Right. Okay. That's that.
I got some. I think this was one that I forget who told us to ask this one. Do you have a most memorable mistake from working in your shop, or?
Oh, let me count the ways. Actually, one of the most memorable was the last house I lived in. My shop was one I actually started forging in. It was an old bank barn. I cut off a third of it and made a shop out of it. Where I did all the grinding and stuff, but there was a small busted up concrete square that used to be the milk house for the farm. So I scavenged blocks and rebuilt it. That's where I built my hydraulic press and put that in. I've got a 25-pound little giant. And I had this habit of when I go to light the forges, I'll take a little piece of paper towel, throw it in a forge, lit, turn on the gas, lights up, no problem. Well, that that forge shop sucked because it was open air all around the top because I didn't want to die of carbon monoxide poisoning.
Yeah.
So when I was out there, I'd be doing the rotisserie chicken method. I'd be like standing in front of the forge going in circles just trying to stay warm. And one time I had a fleece-lined flannel jacket. And my son, oh God, he was 5 or 6 years old or something like that. He was a little kid. And, I hear him coming because he had to walk down a little hill to get to the forge shop. So I can see, oh, here he comes. So I figured the forge's got to heat up for a little while. Threw the piece of paper towel in there, lit it, turned on the forge, walked away. And I walk out of the forge, start walking to him, and he just stops. He goes, "Daddy, you're on fire." That piece of paper towel had landed on the back of my jacket, caught the back of the jacket. The whole back of the jacket was on fire. My hair was cooking. Oh, crap. Threw the jacket off real quick, pat the back of the head. Yeah, that was like, we're just watching my son's eyes turn to like, size of eggs. "Daddy, you're on fire." So, okay, yeah. And yeah, that's not the first and last time I lit myself on fire. And now I got blades flying at me and stuff like that. So yeah, my wife has a very large insurance policy on me.
So that's it for our questions. We like to end with one final question of, was there anything we should have asked that we didn't ask?
Yeah, where to get my DVDs?
I'm
just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just joking. I'm just joking. No, not that I can think of, really. No, I just want to, say that I love what I do. I appreciate the help I've gotten from everybody that's helped me out over the years. Every contestant that comes on the show that's not a total douche, which we've only had 1 or 2, and they still made them look good. So I tell everybody that if I can ever help you out with anything, knife making or running a business or anything like that, don't hesitate to reach out and contact me. I mean, that's being a master smith, you're supposed to help people out who are coming up anyway, but I mean, I'm serious, and I do. I get these, the guys, we got a lot of guys that have only been doing this, and girls, sorry, for only a few years and stuff. And I know I had a million questions. And, I hear a lot of like, "Oh, I saw this on YouTube." Okay, there's a lot of good information on YouTube, and and just like any other social media thing, there's a lot of good information. There's a lot of not so great.
Sure.
If you're not sure, check with somebody who knows what they're doing. So, like I said, I always offer to help folks out. And, the guys that are on the show, they're great. I'm grateful to them and the people who started this show. And I guess I'm glad they didn't fire me after season 2. But, no, you guys asked a lot of good questions. Hopefully I answered them to your satisfaction.
Oh, absolutely. For sure. Well, thank you again for sitting down with us and letting us interview you. It's easily our biggest interview to date. And we really appreciate you. And we can't wait to see the J. Neilson pain train back in action on the next episode.
Ooh, it's coming, yeah. I already had 2 x-rays so far this year from the show. I keep telling the contestants that when we go to round 2. And I've already had this hand rebuilt once. I really don't want to do it again.
Oh, yeah.
So pay attention to your handles as much as your blades.
Oof, yeah.
So, but, the only other question is how I've met my wife, but I guess that's not relevant.
Well, we'd love to hear it.
Although she's fantastic. I can't believe she's put up with me and all this craziness and stuff like that. It was, especially the first 3 seasons were really rough. Really rough being apart and stuff like that because we're like each other's best friends and we're always together and stuff like that. But yeah, if you ever lonely, Match.com. Serious, that's how we met.
Really? No
Seriously.
Huh.
No, but yeah, no, that's it.
Cool. Well, thanks again. Everybody, thank you for watching, and you will catch us some other time with some maybe Blade Show videos coming very soon.
Oh, there you go.
And again, thanks, Jay, and that's that.
Thank you, guys.